Good day, folks. Welcome to a macro overview, Intersession 2022. What we're going to take a look at in this background is Section 1, the pandemic of 2020, 2021, 22. And it's a discussion on behavioral health. Section 2, we're going to look at mega long-term global trends, the future of business. We're then going to look at current economic measurements and forecasts. Then we're going to take a look at policy impacts. Now, you might say, why are we looking at these things if this is a course in financial statement analysis or organizational behavior? Well, if we're looking at this is the environment in which business is operating today and will operate in the future. Firms need to understand and adapt to these trends, situations that are occurring. It goes into strategic planning, tactical planning, how we manage people, how leadership is provided, and it puts it in context. We can't look at either of these topics on their own from a purely theoretical perspective. So we're going to go through this, and as we do our current events presentations for both classes, I think you're going to find that these things will help us understand what is happening today, what the implication is on our topics of discussion. So let's get started here. And the last thing is, how does this impact you and what we'll do in this course? And that sort of be a little more deeper than what we just did here. First thing is, it's the pandemic. It started back in March of 2020, and it's still going strong. We've gone through the first phase of COVID, and then we had the Delta variant, and now we got the Omicron. If we look at the raw numbers, and this is from the New York Times as of December 17th, just a couple things to point out here. This is since the pandemic began. We peaked last winter. We got very good in the summer, came back up, and now we're heading back up again as Omicron is starting to hit us. Just to give you a sense that there were over almost 51 million people in the U.S. have had COVID. This is the scarier number. 804,000 people have died. If we look at what's been happening for the past 2 weeks, we can see number of cases is up 20%. We're testing more. Hospitalizations up 18%. Deaths up 15%. It continues to be a really important issue. Many of us, and I'll put myself in that category, we're done with COVID. I mean, we all would say that. We're done with it. But remember, COVID isn't done with us. If we look up here at the vaccination status, at least one dose. Those 65 and up are doing very well. Fully vaccinated, though, when you're looking at it, 12 and up, only 71%. That still means there's almost 30% of people who are not fully vaccinated. In the 65 and over, it's significantly more. So that's the current situation. Let's take a look at the black swan theory. Since Roman times, all swans are white has been a fundamental truth. In 1726, a Dutch expedition captured 2 black swans, proving their existence and disproving the theory that all swans are white. Now, when we look at it, black swans are very rare events. Okay? They have an extreme impact, and they can only be predicted retrospectively and not prospectively. So when we look at what we call a black swan event, it's a highly improbable event with 3 characteristics. 1, it's unpredictable. 2, it carries a massive impact. And then after the fact, we concoct an explanation to make it appear less random and more predictable. That's what COVID is, okay? It's a black swan event. It has a catastrophic impact, as we've seen over the past almost 2 years. It has had Health issues impacted people's physical health, behavioral health, short-term, long-term. The economic situation has had a short-term impact and a long-term. Business. How does business run? Our daily work, our daily life, our work, our rest, eat, how we socialize, all of this impact has hurt us. Now, the one thing I want to acknowledge this because I think it's important as we see some of the things in both courses, what's happening. What's trauma? And trauma is something that results from events, that is experiences or circumstances that are experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening that has lasting and adverse effects on the individual's functioning, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. That's a definition of trauma. We've all been traumatized by COVID-19 in one way or another. And we deal with trauma differently. We look at it, it hits us physically, emotionally, behaviorally, cognitively, how we think. And when we look at this, sometimes we deal with trauma up front, and as it's happening, we react one way, but there can be a longer term impact. And if you look at COVID, I highlighted some of them that I think are the most important things that I've experienced. Sometimes feeling overwhelmed, decreased concentration, sleep patterns can be disrupted, loss of interest, eating or drinking more or less than normal, drinking or smoking more than normal. But there's the other ones too. Panic attacks, feeling of hopelessness, numbing, irritability. So that's how we deal with trauma, and that we all, you and me, have been experiencing for almost 2 years. This quote here, I think, applies to both you and I. For some organizations, near-term survival is the only agenda item. Others are peering through this fog of uncertainty that we're in, thinking about how to position themselves once the crisis has passed and things have returned to a new normal. The question is, what will normal look like? Well, no longer can say how this crisis will last. We thought we were over it. Then there was Delta. Then there was Omicron. What we find on the other side will not look like the normal of the past. The Chinese use 2 brush strokes to write the word crisis. One stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize that there's an opportunity. If we look back over the last century, we saw some of the world's most successful businesses form during moments of crisis. And that is important for us to see what is going to happen next. I think resilience, very important. Flexibility in planning. How do we withstand that shock, if you will? How do we adapt to change? How do we pursue our goals? How do we anticipate risk? How do we protect our weak spots? Now, why are we talking about this instead of just using a book? Wouldn't a book be easier? I could just give you the book, tell you to read the book, talk about the chapter. But that's the past. Understanding what's happening now will help you learn and grow and better prepare for your future. Honestly, much of what is written in textbooks are going to be rendered obsolete by this Black Swan event. Okay? Just think about that. Because this has never happened before, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's why this is important for us to really look at what's happening, try to interpret it. What does it mean? Where are we going? When we look at this, what's happening after COVID, I think we see some very important trends here. One that we all see is remote work. Some are going to stay completely remote, primarily equal mix. So we're seeing that nobody's going back to anything pre-COVID. We're moving forward with new ways. Important for us to know as we move forward.